Oh, honey, you have no idea. Just yesterday, as I was getting Mrs. Eleanor's roots done, you know, the one who comes in every 3 weeks like clockwork? She's a lovely woman, always so poised, always so elegant, with that perfect little pearl necklace. But yesterday she came in and I could tell something was off. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and she was a little more reserved than usual. She just sat down in the chair and stared at her reflection in the mirror, and for a long time neither of us said a word. I started to mix her color, a nice warm honey blonde, and a few moments later she finally sighed. It was a deep, weary sigh, like she had been carrying a weight for months. "Marcia," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I just have to tell someone." I almost dropped the color bowl right there on the floor. I knew something big was coming. I've been doing her hair for 10 years, and she's never been this vulnerable with me. I put my hand on her shoulder and said, "Eleanor, honey, my chair is a confessional. You know that. Tell me everything." She took a deep breath and then she started. She told me about a family lunch they had last Sunday. Her son James and his wife Chloe. You remember Chloe, right? The one who works in marketing, always posting those perfect pictures on Instagram? The one with the designer handbag, she bought a new one every month. Eleanor has always been a little reserved about her, but she's never said anything negative. It was always, "Oh, Chloe is so busy," or "Chloe has such good taste." But yesterday, all of that was gone. The way she said the name, Chloe, it was like a bad taste in her mouth. She said the lunch was supposed to be a nice affair, a celebration of their wedding anniversary. It was at their house, and Eleanor had spent all morning preparing a beautiful meal. Her famous roasted chicken, a lemon herb potato salad, and a chocolate torte she's been making for decades. The entire family was there, her sister, her brother-in-law, even her son's father-in-law, a big-shot lawyer. Everyone was dressed up, the table was set beautifully, and Eleanor was so proud. She was beaming as she served everyone, but apparently, as soon as Chloe sat down, she started making subtle comments. Not direct insults, mind you, just little, cutting remarks. Eleanor said it started with the table setting. Chloe looked at the antique tablecloth, a family heirloom, and said, "Oh, that's charming. Very old world, isn't it? I'm sure it's lovely for a casual tea party, but I was thinking something a bit more modern for a real anniversary lunch, you know?" Eleanor's sister, a sweet woman, tried to change the subject, but the comment hung in the air. Eleanor just smiled and pretended she didn't hear. She was trying so hard to be the good mother, the good hostess. Then, when Eleanor served the roasted chicken, Chloe took a tiny piece, poked at it with her fork, and said, "My mother uses a sous vide machine for her chicken. It's impossible to get it this dry otherwise, isn't it?" Eleanor looked me in the eye when she said that, and I swear I could see the hurt. She said everyone at the table went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Eleanor just said, "Well, I prefer to roast mine the old-fashioned way, dear," and changed the subject to her brother-in-law's new car. But the damage was done. Chloe had made her point. She was superior, her mother was superior, and Eleanor's hard work was, well, not good enough. It didn't stop there. Later, Eleanor said Chloe pulled out her phone and started showing pictures of her newly renovated kitchen. She said, "My mom helped us pick out all the countertops. We're going for this ultra-minimalist look. No clutter, no mess." And she kept looking pointedly at Eleanor's own kitchen, which is full of life and love and all the things that make a house a home. Eleanor said Chloe's phone was practically a weapon, with every picture a little jab, a little reminder that she and her family were just better. I couldn't believe it. I mean, who does that? To their own mother-in-law, in front of the whole family? My jaw was on the floor. Eleanor just kept talking, and her voice was getting stronger now. Not sad anymore, but a little bit angry. She said she went to the bathroom and just stared at herself in the mirror, and she said to herself, "Eleanor, why do you let this child treat you this way?" And that was the moment, she said, that something inside of her just snapped. Oh, you haven't heard the half of it, darling. So there she was, in that little powder room, looking at herself in the mirror, and she said a calm came over her, a kind of clarity. She looked at her reflection, at the tired eyes and the forced smile, and she realized something. This wasn't just about a comment on her chicken or her tablecloth. This was a deliberate act of cruelty, a power play. She told me, "Marcia, I realized Chloe was trying to put me in my place, to To show everyone, my son, my sister, my own husband, that I was just this old-fashioned, simple woman, that her world with its sleek surfaces and expensive gadgets was better than mine. And I thought to myself, no, not today, sweetheart. And when she said that, I swear I almost dropped the dye bottle. My jaw was on the floor. I said, Eleanor, honey, what did you do? Did you say something? Did you confront her? She just smiled a little, a mischievous kind of smile I'd never seen on her face before. No, she said, I didn't. That would have been exactly what she wanted. She wanted a scene, an emotional outburst so she could tell everyone, see? She's just so dramatic. She went on to tell me that she walked back to the dining table, sat down, and finished her meal as if nothing had happened. She even complimented Chloe's shoes, something simple and disarming. Chloe, she said, looked a little confused, maybe even a little disappointed that her barb hadn't landed. The rest of the afternoon, Eleanor was the picture of grace, but inside, she said her mind was racing. She was formulating a plan. The next day, she called me, and she sounded like a different woman. The plan was already in motion. Marcia, she said, her voice filled with a new kind of energy, I'm going to throw a party. I was like, a party? Eleanor, this is not the time for a party. But she was adamant. No, you don't understand, she said. It's not just a party. It's a gathering. I'm inviting our family, of course, but also some of my friends from the garden club and my book club. And I'm also inviting Chloe's mother, you know, the one with the sous vide machine. I had to sit down at my desk. I was so intrigued. I asked her what she was going to do. And she said, I'm not going to be like her. I'm not going to humiliate her in front of everyone. That's not who I am. I'm going to do something much more subtle. I'm going to let her humiliate herself. She explained that she had been doing some research, as she called it, on social media. She'd been keeping an eye on Chloe's posts, and she noticed something interesting. Chloe was constantly posting about her perfect life, her impeccable taste, her sophisticated knowledge of wine and gourmet food. It was all so curated, so fake. Eleanor said she saw a photo from a recent charity gala that Chloe had been to, a big fancy event. In the photo, Chloe was holding a glass of what looked like a rare, expensive wine, and she had a caption about the incredible vintage Eleanor, who has been a connoisseur of wines her entire life thanks to her travels with her late husband, knew the kind of glass Chloe was holding was all wrong for that type of wine. It was a small detail, but to Eleanor it was a tiny crack in Chloe's perfect facade. So her plan was this. She was going to serve a very specific, very rare bottle of wine at her party. A bottle that she and her husband had been saving for years, and she was going to have Chloe's mother, a guest of honor, there to witness the whole thing. Eleanor said she was going to ask Chloe, in front of everyone, to describe the wine for the guests. She was going to put her on the spot, but in a way that seemed completely innocent. Like, oh, Chloe, you're the expert. Why don't you tell everyone about this special vintage? And because Chloe has never actually cared about wine, just its appearance on social media, Eleanor knew she would stumble. She would try to bluff her way through it, and in front of her own mother and the very people she was trying to impress, her mask would slip. My mouth was hanging open. It was so elegant, so diabolically brilliant. It wasn't about a chicken dish anymore. It was about exposing a lie. It was about dignity. Eleanor had not only decided to react, but she had decided to fight with grace and wit. She said she was so tired of watching Chloe belittle her for her choices, her home, her life. This was her chance to show everyone that being real and genuine was worth more than a designer bag or a fake social media persona. Of course, honey, I could not leave you hanging. I was on the edge of my seat just listening to her. So the day of the party came, and Eleanor said she was a nervous wreck. She had this beautiful dress on, a deep blue silk, and she had me do her hair in a lovely French twist. Everything in her house was absolutely perfect, and I could tell by the way she was talking that she was ready. She had her game face on. She said the guests started arriving, and her heart was pounding. She saw Chloe and Chloe's mother, Penelope, walk in together. Eleanor described Penelope as this woman who looked like she stepped out of a magazine, all crisp lines and expensive jewelry. And Chloe, she was right by her side, of course, looking so proud. The two of them were a united front of superiority. The party went on for a while. Eleanor was the perfect hostess, laughing with her friends from the book club, chatting with her family. But she said every time Chloe would talk, it was like a little jab. Chloe would talk about her latest trip to Europe or some new restaurant, always with a subtle implication that Eleanor and her life were just quaint. A few people, including Eleanor's own sister, were starting to look a little uncomfortable. Then, Eleanor said, the moment arrived. She had arranged for the special wine glasses to be brought out, and she made a little toast. She thanked everyone for coming, and then she announced that they were going to open a very special bottle of wine, one that she and her late husband had been saving for a very long time. You could feel the shift in the room. Everyone got quiet. Eleanor held up the bottle, this gorgeous, dust-covered thing, and she announced what it was, a rare vintage from a small, family-run vineyard in Tuscany that she and her husband had visited decades ago. She looked at me, right here in this chair, and she said, "Marcia?" Chloe's eyes just went wide. You could see the gears turning in her head. Eleanor then said, in the most gracious voice imaginable, "Chloe, my dear, since you are our resident connoisseur, why don't you do the honors? Please tell everyone a little about this wine and how to properly appreciate it." Eleanor said the room went silent. You could literally hear a pin drop. Chloe, she said, was completely flustered. She was used to talking about wine on her phone, not identifying it in a room full of people. She took the bottle, her hands shaking just a little, and looked at the label. She hesitated for a moment, and then she started to talk. She used all the fancy words. She mentioned notes of cherry and oak. She said something about the terroir and how it was a bold vintage. She was clearly bluffing, just pulling phrases she had overheard at other people's parties. And that's when Eleanor made her move. She looked at Chloe, and then at her son, and then at Penelope, and she smiled. "That's wonderful, dear," she said. "But what's truly remarkable about this wine is the story behind the label. See this tiny little mark here?" She pointed to the cork. "That's the signature of the winemaker. We actually saw him press his thumb into the wax when we bought it. He told us he only does that on the very special bottles that he holds back for his family. They aren't for sale, you see, so the only way we could get one was to beg him to let us buy one of the ones he was keeping for himself, a true family treasure." And she said that's when it happened. Chloe's face just went completely white. She was holding the bottle of wine, and it was so clear that she had no idea what she was talking about. All of her little lies, all of her pretense, it all came crashing down right there in the middle of the room. Her mother, Penelope, looked at her with this look of absolute disappointment, and her son James finally saw his wife for what she was, a fraud. Eleanor said she didn't have to say another word. The moment spoke for itself. Chloe just stood there holding the bottle, completely humiliated. It was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that was louder than any fight could have ever been. "So, you're on the edge of your seat, aren't you? Just like I was." Eleanor leaned back in the chair, and a little smirk played on her lips. She said after that moment of silence, the atmosphere in the room changed completely. It was like a spell had been broken. Chloe's mother, Penelope, who was as sharp as a tack, knew exactly what had happened. She just said, "Chloe, dear, I think it's time for us to go." And they left. Just like that. No goodbye, no apology. They just scurried out with their tails between their legs. Eleanor said her son James just stood there, looking at the bottle of wine and then at her. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes said it all. It was a mixture of shock, confusion, and a little bit of shame. He finally saw the truth about his wife, and he didn't like what he saw. Eleanor's friends and family, on the other hand, gathered around her, complimenting her on the beautiful party and the amazing wine. They didn't even mention what had just happened, but they didn't have to. Everyone understood. Eleanor had fought her battle with grace and won. The next day, she said she got a call from James. He was so quiet, so different from his usual cheerful self. He said he was sorry, not for himself, but for Chloe's behavior. He said he hadn't realized how she had been treating his mother. Eleanor told me he'd had a long talk with Chloe, and she had blamed everyone but herself. She was angry and embarrassed, but she wasn't sorry. Eleanor said she looked at her son and said, "James, honey, you need to decide what kind of person you want to spend your life with. Not just the one she shows to the world, but the one she really is." She said she didn't know what would happen to their marriage, but she finally felt at peace. She had stood up for herself and her dignity, not with a fight, but with a quiet truth. The last part of the story she told me was about something that happened just a couple of weeks ago. She was at the grocery store, and she ran into Chloe. For a moment, she said, they just stared at each other. There was no pretense, no smile, no fake hello, just silence. Then Chloe, without a word, reached out and put her hand on Eleanor's arm. She didn't say I'm sorry, but her look was different. It wasn't contempt. It was respect. It was the first time Chloe had ever acknowledged Eleanor as an equal. Eleanor smiled and said, Marcia, I finally feel like myself again. She got her dignity back, you know? She didn't let that girl take it from her. And that's the beautiful part of the story. It wasn't about revenge. It was about honoring herself. It was about knowing your worth. And that's the thing, you know? We think a beauty salon is just about hair and nails. But it's so much more. It's about women finding their strength, their voice, and their truth. And sometimes, it's about helping them look on the outside the way they feel on the inside. Strong, beautiful, and unapologetically themselves. What about you? What do you think you would have done in Eleanor's place?